thankful. We are feeling very excited and thankful for having Shahram Khosravi with us today. It's a kind of a very special blessing to have you. So as you may know, he is currently a professor at the Department of Social Anthropology at Stockholm University. And his research and publications span a number of fields and interests relevant to the participants in this seminar tonight. Many of you work on anthropology of borders, on questions of precarity, anthropology of migration. And so I'm sure we're gonna find a lot of resonances with his work. His geographical focus is mainly on Iran, Afghanistan, but also Europe. And his work engages broader notions of especially the question of belonging and citizenship, or what he calls quasi-citizenship, othering and racialization, and the question usually not so much addressed, but for us was very inspiring, the question of waiting and temporality of borders. He has published several books, including 3 monographs. Yo Soy Frontera, just published this year in Spanish, and we just heard from him that it comes from my heart, right? You put it in those terms, and I really like that because, and the question of making connections through that book, yes, it definitely sparks resonances and connections. He also published Precarious Lives, Waiting and Hope in Iran, and a 3rd book, Young and Defiant in Tehran. So we were further investigating your work, and we noticed that you edited several volumes on innovative venues. Do you want to mention those?
Oh, sure. Two on waiting and time in migration, and another one that's at least one that we saw recently come out on what happens after deportation, which those of us who have engaged in migration and border studies, we know there's lots of work on detention and removal, but not so much on what happens, changing the gaze of deportation as one more step in a much more complicated and convoluted process. So your work is now pointing in that direction. And this is in addition to, of course, many book chapters and academic journal articles in journals such as Social Anthropology, Journal of Ethnic and Migration Studies, and others. We also have enjoyed that his work crosses over with other spaces of knowledge production, such as art exhibits and different forms of mixings of diary, poetry, and then kind of academic or theorization. We would recommend some very fun videos that you can find, one called Waiting, and the other one, If Grapes Would Ripen, if I'm not mistaken, that's the title, with an Afghani poet. And very, very fun ways to think the border from another side, as the title of the talk goes.
Fun and intense.
And intense. Okay, yes, not just fun, but let's. All right, fair enough. So his work in critical migration and border studies, as Branda said, is leading and key and a well-known name, but he's also signaling, we think, new directions for consideration, partly through that autoethnographic effort from the heart. Besides being an incredible story to read and a powerful way to theorize, is also giving us not just the contributions of someone who had been there, but rather that idea of a situated knowledge of borders and how the method of autoethnography and the insights gained therein can help other scholars, but also broader publics, think migration and borders in different ways or with new terms. And we think that the new lines of research on post-deportation, on the production of politicized waiting and the production of time, wasted time as something that can be extracted from migrants. We think these are pretty unique, and even a lot of critical migration and border studies haven't been going there yet. So we're excited to see where this takes the field as well.
So we took a lot of notes, but we want to stop and let you speak. So we just want to mention that thank you for helping us the border from so many different sides. And just as a personal anecdote, we want to mention that cross paths back in 2015, working on the European Question project, thinking through the question of race and migration with Nicolas de Genova and Mesadra and so on. And so it was interesting to see you again in this other space, this time with Spanish scholars. So welcome and thank you so much for coming, Dr. Khosravi.
Turn the word to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Maribel. Thank you, Sebastian. Thank you, Ignacio, and also Jose and others who organized this. It's my pleasure to be among you tonight. And it is my pleasure to see my book published in Spanish. That's a real joy for me. Let me start with these connections. I think I have written many books, but this book has been special for making its own journey to other languages, to other places, to other readers, not only scholars, but many different people read that book, and also I get a kind of joy and happiness when I received emails from Ecuador or from China or from Kenya that people say, I recognized your story, Shahram. I recognize my parents had similar experience, and that make me happy, because that was exactly the point of the book. The point of the book is not telling you a personal story about me. This is not autobiography. This is autoethnography. And the main point of this autoethnography is connection of experiences. That, as we say in Farsi, del be del rah dare, hearts are connected. That somewhere beyond all differences, something can be common among us. And I wanted to reach that connection. And I think borders was a way to use because all of us we face different borders in different forms. And let me say, I try to have a informal conversation instead of reading a paper which is boring. So I try so you please excuse me if I go back and forth, and of course we can develop those aspects are not clear in Q&A later on. The title of the seminar is what do we see if we look at the border from the other side? So that for me is an important positioning, positionality, position myself on the other side, trying to understand what do we see, what people see if they look at the border from the global south, from the other side, what they see. And that repositioning is important for the kind of knowledge we produce. Yeah, our knowledge, as you know, is depends on where we are standing, not only in form of personal biography that I am a man, that I am a middle-aged man, or I am white, or I'm black, but also intellectual backgrounds. Who are my intellectual ancestors? as you see in the book, is dedicated to Gloria Anzaldúa. Gloria Anzaldúa is my ancestor. I see her as my ancestor. I see Walter Benjamin as my ancestor. I mean, both of them people of border, people of, thinking at the border, thinking and writing in the borderlands. So this forms what I see, and what I see when I look at the border, I see a history of coloniality, I see infrastructure of racism. And when I talk about borders, I not only refer to the border lines between two states, I refer to bordering practices, which is more than border between two states. That practices which can happen not only at the border, but other places, that suddenly in Madrid or in London or in Stockholm, border shows up. Or not only at the moment you cross the border, but maybe 10 years, 20 years after that too. So the title of the book in Spanish and in Italian, Io sono confine, and in Spanish, Yo soy frontera, I am border, coming from exactly that experience that, as Etienne Balibar put it many years ago, the question is not, where is the border, but the question is, as I developed that in the book, how border is embodied, yeah? How borders become part of my body, how my body is turned into a border, yeah? So border is selective, yeah? Border is selective, and they target different bodies differently. So the question is, who is targeted of the border this time here? So this is why the title of the book is that, I Am Border. So it is targeting bodies, and here I also have to mention that borders and bordering practices, they function through senses. So bodies are important and central. If you don't sense a border, there is no border for you. If you cross the border between, from Spain to Portugal, and nobody stop you and nobody ask about any documents from you, so there is no border for you. Yeah? But when you are stopped physically, when you are confined, when you are humiliated, when you are kept in waiting, yeah, waiting is also a matter of senses. So then you sense the border, yeah, and also this senses is related to a question of materiality of border. Which materiality is used to build up a border walls, border fences, and what is the design of that? So materiality design of border construction is important. And also, if we look closer to that part of the materiality of borders, then we can see what I mentioned before, that this is a continuation of coloniality, that we see a history and infrastructure of an old racism. I give you two examples, which examples are not in the book. Of course, it came after in other texts. During the Second World War, the American Army constructed plants during the war for very fast building up landing fields for airplanes. And they use it, it's called pierced steel planks, PSP. And it was used during the Second World War in Europe, very much in Italy. And after that, in different wars in Asia, in Vietnam War, for example, American army used that very much. After the Second World War, when American army left Europe or part of the Europe, so Italian companies, Agip, any oil company, they took these plants to north of Africa, but also to the Middle East in their oil extraction, operations. And part of that very close to the village I come from in Iran. So it was used in war, it was used in oil industry, in destruction of nature, in stealing of oil, but also some part of the border between Mexico and United States, is constructed by recycling of that. So we see same material is used in building walls, in doing wars, and stealing of oil, and destruction of nature. So looking closer to the materiality of border from the other side, you see how these things of unsettling people, of destruction of nature, is connected to each other. Another example is barbed wire. The history of barbed wire goes back to 1870 something in the United States, when farmers, built that for cattle industry, for meat industry. Then later on it was used against so-called native or American, so-called Indian tribes in North America. And then it came to Europe, used during the Second World War, and today is used against migrants, So barbed wire, and barbed wire exactly doing that which I talked about, senses. That is border functioning through pain. So if you try to cross a barbed wire, you maybe cut your flesh of your body. So pain becomes central and sensing pain becomes central in construction of borders. Borders are, and materiality of borders show us that it is very expensive. 30 years ago, was the time of the fall of Berlin Wall, and we celebrated, Europe celebrated this last year, walls disappearing, 1989, it was only 16 border barriers in the world. Today is up to 80. So we have 5 times more border barriers since the fall of the Berlin Wall. And it is very expensive. It is, for example, the border wall between the United States and Mexico. It costs about $5-6 million per kilometer. Saudi Arabia invested $20 billion for construction of borders between Saudi Arabia and Yemen. So this is about rich countries constructing border against poor people. So class is important. If you have money, you are not crossing Mediterranean Sea in shaky boats. You buy citizenship in Malta, 1 million euro, yeah? $200,000 and you can buy citizenship in one Caribbean island. Or you can move to Canada through investment, 300,000 Canadian dollar, and you can get gradually, Canadian citizenship. So borders are for poor people. So class is important here, and this is how borders have becoming partitioning, partitioning not only physically of bodies, but also how different body can experience the world differently. And this is how we can be mobile, how we can move, which passport you have. If you have a German passport, you can travel to 175 countries without visa. If you have Afghan passport, you can move to only 25 or 30 countries, and those countries are poorer than Afghanistan. And this is about class, because if you cannot move freely, you cannot improve your social situation. Yeah, social mobility is limited, is related to mobility of your body. If you are unhappy with your salary in Spain, you move to Canada because you can do that. But not a worker in Bangladesh. And this is also related to the wage gap between the global north and global south. And this is the related to outsourcing, to moving out of production from Europe, from Sweden to Bangladesh, for example. The wage gap exists thanks to this gap between mobility possibilities. Yeah. So what I try to say is, if you look at the border from the other side, you see not only migration issue, not only nation states, but also you see other histories, other economies, other actors. And this is important. This is important to see how they are related to each other, and how what we see as isolated as migration problem in news or in political discourses or in public debates or in some academic researchers, migration is isolated to itself. And I try to say, if we remove, if we move us and trying to see at this question from the other side, we see other actors, we see other histories, we see other stories, and this is important to do, because it is only then you can see how borders are related. Bordering practices is, in some sense, colonial practices. That's why I say borders are infrastructure of racism. Borders are ugly. They are ugly not only because they are constructed by ugly materials or they have ugly designs, they have that too, but they are ugly because they signal ugly things. A wall signals something about the people on the other side. A wall signals something negative about the people on the other side. That the other side, people are dangerous, they are unwanted, they are maybe not as human as us, So when borders are constructed, they create subjectivities. And this is the most dangerous part of the borders, yeah? Because even when they disappear, that mentality, that mental wall does not disappear. And this exactly happened with the Berlin Wall. I mean, Berlin Wall disappeared 30 years ago, but still, you know, if you read the studies from Berlin, you see how mentally people still think about East and West, that people on the East side are different from people on this West side. So even wall disappear physically, they remain in our head mentally. And of course, they don't work. That's the main point in my book. That and let me take you to Karachi, 1987. I was talking to a human smuggler, and I was worried about I cannot travel to Europe because I was undocumented. For those of you who have not read the book, I was undocumented for a period of time there. And I wanted to be smuggled to Europe, and talking to a human smuggler, and I asked, yeah, the borders are closed now, you cannot send me. And he said, don't worry, Shahram, they cannot close the door of the world, yeah? So the doors of the world cannot be closed. And this is exactly how it is. We can build high walls. We can have very dangerous barbed wire and militarized like Frontex border guards, but people who are forced to move, they move. People who are forced to cross. I mean, that's also a mistake that Europe does. People think that it's about information, that people don't know how dangerous it is to cross the Mediterranean Sea. They know, but they don't have any option. Yeah. Just today, I was listening to this several thousands of people, you know, cross the border into Spain, that, you know, Spanish enclave in north of Africa. Then one woman said something like that I know I might die in the Mediterranean Sea, yeah? But I have no choice, yeah? People from Afghanistan say, maybe we die trying to reach Europe, but at least we die once. Here we die every day. So this is what I mean, that borders cannot stop people who are forced to move. What borders do is making that journey more expensive and more dangerous. I came to Europe from India with a Greek passport, only with 2,000 US dollars. Today, people have to pay 5 times more, and they cannot come by air. They have to sit in shaky boats, and they maybe die. So what Frontex, which is EU organ for border control, and their budget increased from 2005 almost 50 times. So what is the result? When I started my research 15 years ago, it was in average 2 persons per day die trying to reach Europe. Today it's up to 15 people per day in average. Yeah. So what is the consequences of bordering practices and the border regime we have today? Please tell me if I have talked enough. So let me also say something about the time. When we think about borders, migration, of course we think about spaces, places, because migration is about movement from one place to another place. But bordering practices has a temporality aspect too. So it's keeping people waiting and delaying people is part of bordering practices. For people, it takes 15 years to move from Baghdad to Budapest. It takes 2 years for people to move from Athens to Berlin. It takes 2 weeks from Milan to Rome for asylum. So this is how different bodies are delayed, yeah? So delaying is part of, borders cannot stop, but they can delay, yeah? They can delay and they can keep people in waiting. And people in waiting, and when I'm talking about waiting, I'm not talking about 1 month, 1 year, I'm talking about 10 years, I'm talking about 15 years. I meet people in my research about deportation to Afghanistan. So I meet young people, 25 years old, who have been waiting 15 years of their life, 15 years of 25, or 13 years of 20, yeah? So large parts, so waiting is kind of lifestyle. And if you look at the average time to be in refugee situation, 1996, it was 9 years. Today is more than 20 years. So not only we have more and more people displaced, stateless and asylum seeker refugee, but they are in that condition longer and longer. Refugee camps, which was a temporary solution for a problem, have become permanent in different parts of the world. Yeah. So keeping people in waiting and delaying is part of bordering practices. And also when we think about borders, we associate borders to lack of mobility, that people cannot move, yeah? I want to also add something to this and say keeping people in circulation is also part of bordering practices. So people are not only, being camped or in detention centers, but they are kept in moving all the time. They are sent back and forth between countries, between different condition of undocumented or being asylum seekers, etc., etc. So we see a circulation of, and many migrants express it in terms of being sent back to square one. Being sent back to square one, it means that you have to start from scratch again and again and again. And this is how control of labor force is working today. It's a migrant labor force is like that. I don't have time to go in details, but if you are interested, I'm more than happy to send you a text if you want. I can write my email somewhere in chat section. So delaying, waiting, and keeping people in circulation. What is the result of that is stealing of time. So if we think about migration, if we think about all these people we see in boats, in camps, here and there, waiting, deported, this or that, yeah? And deported after a long time. I mean, for example, in the United States, which is, we are talking about mass deportation, people are deported after 20, 30 years, yeah? So what happened to that time? What happened to that time people have invested in terms of working, contribution to that economy, contribution to the country, in terms of learning the language, in terms of building up families, love, relations, friends? What happens to that time they have invested as a human being to build all these things, to accumulate all these different capitals? It's stolen from them. And if I give you, for example, in terms of mass deportation of Afghans from Iran, nobody knows how much money employers can save when their workers are deported in terms of unpaid salaries. How much money states save in terms of, not paying pensions to workers, yeah? So it's a huge amount of time which is stolen from migrants through deportation, through circulation, through delaying, through keeping in waiting. So this is the temporality temporality aspect of bordering practices. I say just a few words more and I stop, I promise. And then we can have a conversation. This book, which I'm here for, invited Yo Soy Frontera, I'm border, is written in form of autoethnography. It means that my own journey is there. I use that journey to connect to other people's journeys and to tell a story about migration and borders. But I want to say, and I want to emphasize that book is not about me, but it is about us. I want to say that book is not about migrants, but about borders we have built. It is not about migration, but it is about our imagination and how our imaginations are bordered and how we are not able to imagine a world beyond borders. And this is very similar to the very famous phrase that we can imagine. I think it's from Frederick Jameson, that we can imagine the end of the world, but not the end of capitalism. And that's exactly the same. We cannot imagine a world without borders. And these borders didn't came from God or nature. We built them not a long time ago. And this is amazing that we cannot imagine a life beyond that, something we constructed ourselves. So let me end by emphasizing that borders are about bordering our imaginations too. So when we build borders, we not only keep people out, but we also very much border our imagination as well. Thank you for listening. Thank you.